Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to another episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah. Today we have Mr. Pop Mhan on the program. Pop is an artist, started out at Wildstorm, kind of under the tutelage of Jim Lee, and then moved on to a very diverse career across many different publishers. You may remember him from SpyBoy, which was written by Peter David in the 90s, but he also did things like Batgirl, Flash, Bionicles, and is now the primary artist on The Disavowed, which is a book we covered with Josh Blaylock and Devil's Due Studios. So the first issue has kickstarted. The second issue, I think, is in the works, and then on from there. So let's get to it. Let's talk to Pop Mhan. To welcome Pop Mhan to the program. Pop, how are you?
Hey, good. I am doing a-okay.
That's the way to be. So we're going to kick you off with our, as always, our first question, which is, how did you first discover comics?
So when I was a kid, we would do these little walks to 7-Eleven, and we like it's my brother and I should say, and that was my first time seeing comic books on a spinner rack at 7-Eleven. We did the usual, just kind of collecting them, more like he collected it, and then I just kind of like looked over his shoulder, like, you know, and but I honestly wasn't that interested in comics at that time, to be honest with you. And it wasn't until being a senior in high school when I saw a classmate of mine had a issue of Jim Lee's X-Men #4, the new X-Men thing, and it's the cover with, I always remember the cover because it kind of blew me away. And it was the cover with Wolverine and Jubilee and with the Omega Red arm in there. It's like the red cover.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I had ever seen art where I was like, this is so incredibly good. And it got me pretty much hooked on to comics. And then, yeah, I was in pursuit of it since then. Um, and I guess the caveat there is that uh, I was always in pursuit of comic art, um, a lot more so than the comic book stories themselves. And or that was how it was initially. And so, it was so there was a lot of things that I didn't really read as much as I just perused and went, oh, look, this is cool art, and tried to copy everything. And yeah, so that's how I got introduced to art, or introduced to comics slash art.
And you started drawing shortly thereafter in the high school
Yes,
version of the Discovering
yes,
Comics?
exactly. Yes. So I I didn't really draw in any kind of, serious way. I've always been kind of, semi good at it, but it was never like a pursuit, until the Jim Lee comic. And since that comic, it was like a rabid pursuit. I just wanted to just, I wanted to be good like Jim, basically. And that's how, that was the catalyst for what got me rolling with art and comics.
And did you know how or in any way to, to get your art to the next level, and then also how to actually break in the industry?
So yes, everything happened really, really fast. From the time I discovered, comic books, until I became a professional. It took about maybe 2 years. It, because it was a mindless, just when I say it was a mindless pursuit, it really was a mindless pursuit. Like I lived and breathed comics for like 2 years. You know, I would I would so I graduated high school without any clear direction of what I wanted to do in life. Um, when I was in high school, I was more of a, I wanted to play ball. I played football a little bit, and then I wrestled a little bit, and then um, and yeah, I just didn't. I was also a skater kid, so I was like, yeah, just all these random things I wanted to do, but had no real clear direction at all. And so when I graduated from high school, uh, I found comics. That was like kind of the direction I decided I wanted to pursue. And I met a artist, a local artist. I lived in Virginia at the time, and I went to a local comic book show that he was at, and it turned out he was the artist on The Punisher at the time. And so I hounded this guy, this poor guy. His name is Wang Win. Um, I hounded him relentlessly to to show me what's show me what's up, and his bad fortune was letting me know where he lived, which happened to be about a mile down the road from me, about a mile. I mean, yeah, it was literally like less than a mile from my house. And so I would hop on my bike and just, bike over to his house all the time, trying to, knock on the door, and because we didn't have cell phones or anything back then. And I would just hound this guy relentlessly, like, hey, show me how to do this, show me how to do that. And he was like, and then I finally broke him down enough to where he was like, look, draw me this page, take this overnight, draw this page for me, and show me what you got. And um, he actually gave me 3 days or something like that to do it, and I did it in a day. And I brought it back, and I was like, here, here you go. All of this, I should say, I was going to college, or a community college. I took classes, and I also did two jobs. I worked at Home Depot and also at the movie theater, which happened to be the movie theater that Patton Oswalt worked at, actually.
Oh,
He was before me, but I had
yeah.
never met him or anything. But it just turned out that was the same movie theater that I don't know, just was just there. Anyways, but yeah, so I did all of that, and I would draw every night. Like when I came home from work, I would just draw until like 3 o'clock in the morning. But that night, I stayed up the whole night drawing this page, and it was god awful. It was a god awful page. It was god awful work, I should say. And I, like showed it to him. Here you go. Here's what I got. And he was impressed enough that he took me on this as his apprentice, and showed me what to do. Again, this all of this is within about I would say about 3 months after I graduated high school. And so it from the time I graduated high school until I got hired by Jim Lee at Wildstorm, that was about 2.5 years, I think, something like that. Because I was 18 when I graduated, and then I was 20 when I got hired. So, yeah.
Wow.
So it was a very neck break pace. It was just a mindless pursuit. It was a sprint, is what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from this apprenticeship,
Mm.
I guess this is now maybe like less than 2 years from that point
Yeah. Yeah.
to how did you get to from that point to Wildstorm? What
Okay.
was the sequence of events, or even just the sort of the big break?
Right. I glossed over a lot of stuff in between the jump from Wang to Jim.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, my brain just kind of went, okay, well, this is one milestone. That was the next milestone. So let me see. I worked for Wang for about 6 months, doing backgrounds, doing just doing anything that he wanted me to do. And I helped out on a book called Law Dog versus Grimrod, um, which was from Eclipse Comic back in the day. And then from there, he started on this new book with, I think, Malibu, or I forget what the company was, but I think it might have been Malibu. And then from there, that was during the time where Image was starting up and all this other stuff, and they had made the break, and then or they had made the break from Malibu, I think. I forget. It's been a
Yeah.
long time. But at any rate, so during all of this that was happening with Wang and everything, I was going to conventions and showing my portfolio around as well. And I had met, I had gone to a Chicago Comic Con in, I think it was like 94, 1994. And I met Sal Regla there. He was an inker for Wildstorm, and I showed him my portfolio, and he looked at it, um, and they were the pages that I showed were actually pages from Wang's book that I was working on for him, which you know, um, I probably wasn't supposed to show now that I think about it, but I did. I mean, I didn't mean to, I guess. Or my 20-year-old brain just didn't comprehend all the legalities of it. But at any rate, yeah, I showed it to Sal, and Sal grabbed me and was like, "All right, we're going." And I was like, "Where are we going? Where are we going?" And he dragged me up to this private room, like upstairs from the convention hall downstairs. We went up to this private room where Jim was signing, and he had this line that was just like wrapped around. It's a typical Jim Lee line, just wrapped around the hall like 10 times over or something. And then Sal just drags me to the front of the line and plops this portfolio in front of Jim. He was like, "Hey, take a look at this kid." And I'm meeting my hero for the first time. But I'm also aware of all these daggers that that people were just kind of going boring to the back of my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, "Hey, I've been standing in line for like six hours, and here's this butthead, just cutting in line, and then just taking up Jim's time." And yeah, so Jim started flipping through my book or my portfolio, and he was like, "Okay, so did you draw? What did you draw, and what is this for?" But just go through the details. And then he was like, "All right, cool. All right, well, we'll be in contact." And he was like, before that, he was like, "So, how do you feel about where do you live?" I'm like, I'm in Virginia, which is on the other side of the coast from where he's at in California. And he was like, "How do you feel about moving to San Diego?" And I was like, "What? Yeah, of course. Like who wouldn't?" Um, so Jim was like, "All right, we'll be in touch." And then I didn't hear anything for about 2 weeks after I got back from the show from Chicago Comic Con. And then 2 weeks after that, I got a call from Sarah Becker, who was the liaison, the editor there. And she was like, "All right, so Jim wants you to do this and this and this, like these pinups type thing. And he wanted you to draw a Spartan, which is a character from Wildcats, and then a Zealot, which is another character from Wildcats. And just to see how you do with heroes." And so I was like, "How much time do I have? All the stuff." And this is way back in the day, obviously. So we have to send everything by snail mail or FedEx, basically. And um, so she was like, "Yeah, you got to do it in like less than a week, blah blah." And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." So I did it like overnight again. Like I was just like blazing through it, sent it in, like waiting, sat there with bated breath, like waiting for the phone call, like when are you gonna call? When are you gonna call? And I didn't hear anything for about a week, which is like
An
torture.
eternity. Yeah.
Yeah, it was torture. It was just like, why don't you love me anymore? That sort of thing. And so they finally called, and it was actually Jim on the phone. And Jim was like, "Hey, so you know, these aren't very good." I was like, "No, what did I do?" And because see, so back then, um, the way I drew was very dark. Like it was like I had a conglomerate in Virginia that had it was like basically me, Wang, and then Jay Lee as well, and Sean Chen. We were all kind of like these guys that were familiar with each other, and I would I at that point I was young enough to where, or I was younger, and so I would ape a lot of different styles. Um, all of which to explain that my faces were very Jay Lee-esque, Wang Wen-esque, which were, or Simon Bisley-esque, which were not very heroic
Hmm.
traditionally. They were more kind of like evil looking, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so Jim was like, "Yeah, this is not very good in the sense of like, yeah, they're not very heroic looking. They're," and he was just like, "I don't think you really fit in here at Wildstorm." To which, I begged him. I was like, "Come on, man, give me another chance. I'll draw however you want me to draw." Because I was good at that. I was very good at dissecting things. I would look at it and just like analyze it and tear it apart and put it together in a way that I could understand. Um, which was a very helpful tool. Artistically, because because back then we didn't have internet. So if you wanted to draw a car, you had to be able to take this object, which it was a very complicated series of shapes, and then just break it all apart and then visualize and analyze why, how it would look at different angles, and what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was like you'd have to be able to do all those things. And I did that the exact same way with like styles, or the way, someone would approach how to draw certain things in a certain way. So I've always been good at that, just from an analytical point of view. So I was like, "Hey Jim, just tell me what you want. I would get it. I would get there. Just tell me what you want." And so Jim was like, "Just give me something more traditional, blah blah blah." And I took about 2 days this time. I actually like kind of sat there and tried to extrapolate what all of that means. Trying to figure out like, okay, I'm gonna mind melt with Jim Lee and figure out what Jim Lee means when he says heroic. Because sometimes people give rather vague, like one person's hero is not really another person's hero. So I had to kind of figure out, okay, I guess the traditional. All right, so Jim comes from a Arthur Adams, Neil Neil Adams,
Yep.
Michael Golden background. So all of these artists that I kind of know that his background was kind of in that school.
Hmm.
So in that way, his idea, or what he meant when he said he wanted something more heroic, would be kind of in that vein, instead of like Simon Bisley, I don't know,
Right.
like Mobius or
Sort of.
some, you know what I mean, something kind of like
Yeah, angular and rough, and
right,
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
more independent, so it was like, okay, the more classic John Byrne kind of feel. So that's what I did. I just kind of pushed myself further into that area, and then sent it to him, and then I got a call about, I want to say about a week, maybe it was less than a week, well, 5 days later, and Jim was like, "Hey, so this is a great improvement. You're how do you feel about moving out?" I was like, "All right, well, I'm more than happy to move out." He's like, "All right, well, congratulations, you're in." And then so yeah, about I remember it was about maybe 20 less than it was about 20 days before my 25th 21st birthday. I was in San Diego. So that was pretty cool. Um, and yeah, and it was insane just being in that studio, walking in it for the first time, and being next to like my artistic hero, my just being in that proximity with Jim was just it was insane. It was really really cool, and yeah, I learned a lot. He taught me a lot just now. I was a sponge, absorbing everything.
Soaking it all up.
Um, yeah, soaking it all up. So yeah, that's the story of how I broke into Wildstorm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean that's a big one, and
Yeah.
must have been. I mean, I can't imagine sort of emotionally when you were, in
Oh,
your 20s. Like,
yeah.
yeah, so exciting, but you're so deflating when it's not like what he wanted and stuff. That
Right, right.
sounds awesome. But then so you land there. You're in San
Yeah.
Diego. You're at Wildstorm. I want to ask you a couple questions about that
Sure,
experience.
sure.
One, it was a studio, which
Mhm.
is a little bit different than I certainly what is done now. I don't think there are a lot of studios around anymore, but even
I
back
don't think
then,
so.
maybe it was different. But it was your first experience in comics. What did you like? You didn't have anything to compare it to because you didn't really have much experience before that. But did you like that sort of studio, the camaraderie, and working like shoulder to shoulder with other creators?
Yeah. So it's hard to it's hard to I didn't have anything for comparison, obviously.
Right.
Well, I mean, I would work with Wang at his house sometimes, and we would sit there and we'd talk and stuff. So in that way, I guess it was a studio environment, um, but it wasn't anything as I guess as intense as what Wildstorm was because I just turned 21, like freshly minted 21, and then on top of that. I came from a pretty sheltered life at that point. I was never on my own or anything like that before, and so just like it was like college rolled into, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
it was like I was like experiencing life at well breakneck pace. You know, it just life was just coming at me really hard, really fast, and so I was trying to navigate, trying to be, all of the insecurities and all of the I don't know all of the new experiences that were hitting me at that time. Uh, I was in the studio with Travis Charest, like J. Scott Campbell, Scott Clark, Brett Booth, Jim. Will would come in every so often. Matt Broom, like all these like stars were there, and it was
Yeah.
I was definitely very starstruck. And being 21, you've got this weird. It was like I had really low self-esteem already, but at the same time, you're overcompensating for it by just being 21 and just just not being very mature, basically. I think, and so my experience there, while I learned a lot artistically and everything, like I succeeded pretty okay with art, but I think I definitely failed at life. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I mean, I failed, but I also grew a lot. I was a
Right.
completely different person after I came back from Wildstorm, uh, and yeah, so it was just a lot to take in. It was really overwhelming, but and just trying to navigate through all of the different experiences was very 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 interesting, very interesting. Um, so, which leads me to what was the question again?
Well,
I
no,
kind of
no, it
went,
was sort of
I
working
went
in
down
it.
this,
Yeah, no,
I went,
working in a studio environment.
yeah, yeah,
But it sounds like, I mean, it was a big learning experience.
it was,
But also, you were so young that it was,
yeah,
I think anybody's early 20s are pretty
yeah,
turbulent. I mean, mine were
yeah,
as well. And so being out on your
right,
own and
right,
also being in this
right,
crazy high energy place with all the
right,
people that you look up to,
right.
yeah, that had to be pretty intense.
It was. I think one of the other things that mess with your head a lot was that because it was a Wildstorm, because of the caliber of artists that were there, it's known as like one of the best you know art studios, like shoot in the whole industry. I would think, or at the time, it was definitely that's how you felt, and trying to live up to that expectation was really difficult, and very like it did a number like on your mental health maybe. I mean I kind of hate like to classify as that because it was definitely not that, I don't think, um but it was hard to navigate some of the like perceptions, like it's like you're like people all of a sudden, especially from when I went back home to visit after being at Wildstorm for a few months, when I went back to visit my Virginia. a lot of people start looking up to me and kind of going, "Oh my God, you're at Wildstorm." But then, like me myself, I was just kind of like, "Dude, I suck." I'm like the worst. If there was an armpit of Wildstorm, that would be where I resided. And so so it's hard to kind of I don't know, like mentally see myself there. But you're also expected to kind of live that way, or expected to kind of, fulfill that, I don't know, that status, or that star status that you all of a sudden got. Um, and yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard to figure out. And yeah, but like again, all of this stuff is really just like personal stuff. It wasn't
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it was just so trying to like just be the best artist you can be, while all at the same time trying to grow into the shoes you're wearing now, was hard to figure out.
Yeah. But as you say, it was a big sort of jumping off point. I mean, you learned a lot
Yeah, yeah,
artistically, and
yes,
it probably opened doors
yes,
that you wouldn't have had
yep,
previously.
right,
So let's talk about a lot of the work that you did, obviously post Wildstorm, and
right,
getting all of that, putting all
yeah,
of those lessons into practice.
right.
And one of your early successes, and probably I don't know if you've had probably the most issues in one title you've had, was SpyBoy,
Oh yeah,
which was written by Peter David and
right.
through Dark Horse. How did that project come to you?
Um, so so the way I drew at Wildstorm was, the classical Wildstorm house style, right?
Hmm.
It's a mixture of I'm not saying that other people at Wildstorm drew it that way, but just from my analytical perspective of the art, and what I tried to do was, I would incorporate a lot more like Neil Adams and a lot more Michael Golden um, into my work, and kind of like going in that school. Uh, then that's the way, when I left Wildstorm, you know uh, I wanted to explore further who I was. Like it was a identity thing, where I didn't know who I was, artistically, and shoot, maybe even personally, right? After Wildstorm, it was like, well, I was there, and and I left, and then that chapter of my life, you know, it was like me moving on, as far as just moving on from Wildstorm, and I wanted to kind of just go in a completely different uh, uh, pathway. And so I started looking at a lot of exploring a lot of different art, becoming a lot more open-minded with, you know, the art that I was taking in. And Jamie Hewlett became a big influence. He's the artist of Tank Girl and
Gorillas.
Gorillas. And then that was actually when I started to discover manga as well, and Japanese animation and things like that. So that became a huge influence over my art at that time. Post Wildstorm. Uh, Chris Pacello, obviously, he was a big influence at that time as well. I just, it was like the confines of what the the Neil Adams ultra, like, everything was or the Bernie Hogarth, anatomy, structure, school of thought, and I went kind of the opposite way
Mm.
and went, how can we exaggerate this detail? How can we exaggerate, the human body? How can we exaggerate and the environment to have it be its own, entity, its own thing? And uh, just, like I had discovered that school when I was just shooting, like, pushing myself in the most weirdest ways possible, and that was during the time where I was drawing things for at Marvel, like the Marvel Fanfare stuff, and um, Ghost Rider actually was the other book that I think really was nutty looking. My Ghost Rider just had these big, thick hands. It was just really odd looking, I guess. Now that I'm looking at it, like, from a unbiased view. Back then I was just like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever, But now that I'm older and looking at it unbiased, like, I can kind of see why people didn't really like a lot of the stuff that I did on Ghost Rider. But so after Ghost Rider, like, it was funny though, because when I was finding my identity, uh, uh, post Wildstorm, that look is what got me kind of like a lot of notoriety and a lot of attention. Was all that weird, like, kind of really crazy dynamic hands and just dynamic figure work. Just, wacky wonky looking stuff. And and it was very polarizing too, I think. People either hated it or they loved it. It was never like, it was just me, whatever. It was very polarizing. um and from that from that very polarizing art style, I tried to rein it in more. uh after my, I guess we'll call it the crazy art stage. I tried to rein it in and incorporate it more, like, anime and manga influence. And that was when SpyBoy came around. And Dark Horse was, uh, they wanted to launch this new book, and they were looking for I guess, like a fresh, style, or fresh art style, to kind of go with their fresh, spy younger, younger audience, or not. I don't want to say it was younger audience, but just the look of the character and everything was
Right.
supposed to be fun, hip, and just young. And so, that's how, that's how I got, or that's how they contacted me, to do it. And then they, of course, signed the deal by saying, hey, Peter David is co-creating it. So, and you would be the one handling all of the art duties, like that would be your thing. And so, I was on board as soon as they said Peter David. I love Peter David. I think he's an amazing writer. So yeah, I was definitely on board after that. And yeah, I really enjoyed what SpyBoy was was all about. And it was like some of the best times, I think, in my career, was working with Peter on that. Um, as a matter of fact, so one of the things that I did on that book was, like, me and Peter kind of shaped it together. I think, like, one of the things I did in the book was, after the very first issue, I was a huge fan of Masamune Shirow, and, like, Ghost in the Shell and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he would always draw these little chibi characters, like, throughout the whole, throughout the book. Especially his there was a workbook, or a manual of some kind. I forget what they're called, but this is basically a tome where it would just have, like, the art of, Ghost in the Shell, and they would have these little chibi guys in there. And I saw that, and then I totally ripped it off. I was like, all right, I'm putting that in SpyBoy. And that's what I did, like, these little chibi things at the end of SpyBoy, just to kind of, make it be like the end of whatever. And I inked it. Um, so back in the day, I had an inker, and everything. Norman Lee is another phenomenal guy. But I inked this little section in on the last page myself, because I wanted to make sure that they couldn't erase it, right? So I inked it in. I was like, I don't care what Peter says, but I'm going to get it right. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I did. And then Peter was like, I love this. This is great. So he incorporated all of that into the story as well. Like, these the chibi things became like this. Alex is the uh, alter ego of SpyBoy. So these chibis became like the inner monologue of
Hmm.
Alex's personality. So he incorporated, my little my little rebellion into the
Yeah.
story. I thought it was really, really cool of him to do that. Yeah,
Yeah. It must have been really satisfying that,
very.
you're putting your own mark on it.
Right.
Did you and Peter talk often, or is it more the traditional, like, sort of through the editor, scripts would come and art would go back the other way?
Um, a little bit of both, I think. Peter is really busy. Is a really busy uh writer. So when he wasn't working on SpyBoy, he would be working on a lot of things. But we found time to talk on the phone. Or if I saw him at a con or something, we would have nice long sit downs, go out to dinner and lunch and everything else. But so yeah, like normally the normal operations would be I would talk through the editor about stuff, but for the most part, yeah, I guess for the most part it was like through the editor. But yeah, we would also schedule phone calls every so often as well, whenever
Yeah.
Peter was free. Yeah,
That, that project really put you on the map, so to speak. I mean,
mm,
obviously you had stuff before then and it worked, but I was interested to hear, your artistic evolution up to that
right,
point.
yeah.
And with Spy Boy being, such a success, did you think in your mind, well, I did sort of the traditional kind of straight ahead style, and then I kind of really blew it out on Ghost Rider, and then now I have, this kind of new thing, and this
Right.
seems to be doing well. This is going to be my like style going forward, or did you
Right.
feel like you were just going to continue to evolve?
Um, I have the attention span of a fruit fly. I refuse to call it ADHD because, I don't want to be pigeonholed into one sickness. I'm just sick all over. But no, no. So, but I really do have the attention span of a fruit fly, and so I just kind of go wherever the art style takes me. I think, or wherever inspiration I get, I'll just, do it and just walk down that path. Although I have to say that in my later years, I've just, you know, I'm an old curmudgeon about just, I just kind of go, I'm gonna draw, and that's what I'm gonna do. Man, I don't really, I don't really explore different styles as much as I used to, which is sad. It's kind of sad in that way. But I guess during my formative years, I would just kind of just go, everywhere. But yeah, I guess so. The answer would be that after Spy Boy, uh, I started getting more work on or pretty much after I came back and started drawing the Flash from Spy Boy. It was more the Flash was the more traditional book, and I think back then, like in the early 2000s, um, editors were less open to uh, variant art styles uh, for their main flagship titles like
Mm.
Flash, things like that. So they want to see it drawn a certain way. Of course, there's leeway within that framework to do your own thing, but but I think Mike Waringo on the Flash had opened up the door a lot because before then it was like Greg LaRoque and shoot, these guys are gonna kill me, but I'm totally blanking out on a lot of these names.
Paul
Carlos
Pelletier.
Pacheco, yeah, Pelletier, like all those guys are very classical, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
they have a very standard, a very like uh classic look, right?
yeah.
And so, uh, but within that, I think Waringo was the first real one that really strayed from that look, I think, or during that time period. And that opened a lot of doors for me as well, right? And so that's how I was able to kind of squeak in
Right.
under the radar, kind of go, oh look, here's my crazy look. And yeah. I mean, even then, like I tried my best to kind of stay within that standardized look, but I was still learning a lot, about like anatomy and trying to like reconcile dynamics versus anatomy. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you're tweaking things to the extreme, it's just a lot of it doesn't work anatomically. So I was still trying to reconcile a lot of those like axiomatically different things, I guess. Trying to make them all work. But at
Yep.
any rate, uh, so yeah, I guess I kind of stopped after Flash. I kind of like settled down a lot. Like I was just like And I think a lot of it had to do with a lot of the fan mail I was getting too. A lot of the fan mail was saying things like, this guy doesn't know how to draw. Um, like the anatomy was just horrible. All this stuff, all this stuff. And I was just kind of like, wait a second, I can and I will. And so I did. I really studied, brushed up on my anatomy work, and really like structurally became a lot more well, solid, structurally. But I think in that I also became a lot less experimental. So, you know, uh, I keep telling myself I'm going to just get more experimental one of these days. One of these days, I'll fly like the wind again. No, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, post SpyBoy
Yeah,
is when you really, I think, got into some of the iconic DC characters, like you say,
yeah.
Flash, Batgirl. I think
Yeah.
was there a SpyBoy Young Justice
There
crossover?
was,
Yeah,
there
I saw
was.
that in the bibliography. So,
Yeah.
um, did you feel, I guess once you were starting to get criticism through for the fan mail,
Yeah.
but did you feel like there was pressure to get these big characters right? Because there's certainly more established than SpyBoy and the
Right.
Wildstorm characters
Right.
and maybe even Ghost Rider. Yeah, what did you feel taking on these bigger ones?
Uh, well, I think um, if you didn't draw them correctly, DC at that during that time period was definitely less likely to, you know, put you on something else. You know what I mean? Like they're less likely to give you another title to, try apply your hand at. Because, like their flagship titles are not really for experiment. At that time. Uh, they wanted you to kind of like cut your teeth on a smaller or a less flagshipy title, to kind of like to see if will this stick with this type of art style. Does this art style have legs, or does this artist have the charisma to pull through and all the stuff. And um I think there was definitely a lot of pressure during that time to kind of draw in that way, or the house style way, or to make sure that the characters look the way that they're supposed to look. Corporate being what corporate is, like you definitely want to make sure that the Superman that you're drawing fits the Superman of Lunchboxes, that fits the Superman of uh, the Ride, or you know what I mean. Like all that stuff has to kind of align to make sure that you have a corporate identity and branding, which is all important. I'm not taking anything away from that. You don't want, you know, you don't want to be pushing, or you don't want to be spending millions of dollars on, advertising and marketing and all these tertiary products to all of a sudden have, your audience that you're trying to capture look at these books and go, that looks nothing. This book looks nothing like this, thing that I saw on this marketing. So you want to make sure that all those, things are aligned and properly branded. So yeah, taking nothing away from that. That works. I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that probably prepared you for, you've done a number of licensed books
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
uh, post that, maybe in the middle of it,
Mhm.
including Bionicle. And I
Yep.
imagine, if you're already kind of trying to make sure that your style, you're delivering sort
Mm.
of on what people, I guess, expect, especially something a little bit more like DC, I think is known to be a little bit more corporate. So you
Yeah.
probably have that experience once you get on a licensed property that
Right.
there are gonna be some cooks in the kitchen and you have to sort of adapt to that. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. And again, from my background, I've always been, analytical in that way. Uh, so I had a knack for branding, and I had a knack for, you know, making sure that the things that I drew was matching up with what they were looking for. And that's actually, well, it was there was two reasons why I did really well with third party work, was because I was easy to work with. I didn't give a lot of lip, or I didn't give a lot of like, I'm not gonna change that, because to me it was like, hey, like this is what you're paying for, so what do you want? I got you. And also because I didn't need a lot of direction. Usually, like I can kind of figure out. I was pretty good with figuring out what people wanted, based upon what company they're coming from or what the client was, yeah, their background basically. And I can kind of usually figure out, okay, they're looking for this, even though they're saying whatever, I can kind of figure it out and then give them, you know, the the product without too many like revisions and things like that, because that's really what kills a job is too many revisions, clients kind of going back and forth with you, kind of going, look, this wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for this, I was looking for that, that sort of thing. And if you're able to just nail it, like hopefully the first time, without too many revisions, then you're gold basically. You're a valuable commodity, for the company. Um, and so, yeah, I just had a knack for that. And, for me, I had motivation too, because doing third party stuff it's always like, much better money than, than doing, 90, 80% of the time.
Yeah.
80% of the time, it's much better to do third party work, even though your your I don't want to say fame, but the amount of work that
Reputation.
gets, yes, exactly, your reputation gets diminished a little bit by doing that. Um, but I had mouths to feed and mine basically. No,
Yeah.
no, I was just, I've always been kind of business minded, and so I was just kind of weighing the outcomes. And it was like I like doing third party work. So that's why I did it for so long. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until I took account of like where I was in the standings. It was like, oh, hey, all of a sudden my name's not in circulation anymore because I've been doing a lot of third party stuff. It was like, okay,
Right.
now I have to kind of push back into regular work, to try to get back out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to reestablish your comic book cred, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I gotta
Uh,
get back, get my street creds, man. Street creds.
well, I did want to dwell on it just one more time because
Mhm.
I saw that you've done stuff outside of comics, like what
Mhm.
you're talking about, this third party stuff. You did some like cards, I think Star Wars cards for Tops.
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
maybe some character design for Hasbro.
Yep.
Yeah.
I did Hasbro. I did character design stuff for Hasbro like early on in my career though. I didn't do it so much in the later parts. Uh, so yeah, it was the Hasbro stuff was like much earlier on though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also have on your website, you have comic book work and then a
Yeah.
different bucket sort of for like story consultant and
Yeah.
things of that
Yeah.
nature. So,
Yeah.
what, just out of curiosity, before we turn
Hmm.
back to the comics, what
Sure.
is that kind of work like, and
So
where are your skills there?
right.
What?
So I uh I was born in Thailand, and grew up in a Thai household, even though we lived here in America. We were very traditionally Asian. Uh, so I lived both worlds, and I was gifted with the ability to kind of see things from different perspectives in that way. Um, and I'm not very uh, it's not it's not political. It's having an opinion one way or the other about about things, right? So I would
Yeah,
just
yeah,
kind of see things and kind of go, okay, you're saying this and you're saying this, but what you guys mean is this, and here's how we're going to communicate with each other,
hmm
and try to define certain things or trying to simplify the way we talk to each other. When you're in different cultures, and what makes sense to one person doesn't make sense to someone else from a different culture, and so trying to mediate between all these different cultures, I was able to, yeah, I just picked up that skill. And so what I did in Thailand was, and um, and also in Hong Kong, uh, I would basically, a company would say, okay, we have this idea to do this story, but we want it to be marketable in America, and here's our story idea. I would kind of take it and go down and just try to understand what it is that they're trying to say, and then trying to have it all make sense and translate properly uh, into a Western market versus an Eastern market, and
Mm.
and all of that. So, things, like brand, like it's just basically more branding, more marketing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
But
yeah,
that's a good skill to have, especially as,
yeah,
the world gets smaller, as they say,
yeah,
and everything
yeah,
is sort of
yeah.
global, and you want to
Right,
make sure that you're, talking to all the
right,
audiences and in the right
right,
way, right?
right.
Um,
Exactly. Like,
so
certain, like, some humor is funny in one culture is definitely not funny in another culture, and all of that. Not to say that one is more PC than the other or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's more like questions where, like, hey, what are you trying to establish with this, or what was the message you were trying to do, to accomplish with this humor or with this messaging,
yeah,
and can we translate that in a way that actually makes sense to somebody else, and they're not going, I totally don't, so it's not kind of doing this thing.
right, right.
Um, so yeah, that's, I just did a lot of that. And
Cool.
also story consulting means things like making sure that stories have a proper hook, uh, making sure that they flow a certain way, you know, basically just, an editor of sorts. That's
Yeah,
what I do. Yeah,
yeah. Makes sense, and sounds like interesting work too, to
it was a
diversify.
lot of fun.
Yeah. Um, but let's turn back to comics, and particularly
Okay.
your current work on the Disavowed, which
Uh-huh.
is a project out of Devil's Due Studio with Josh
Hmm.
Blaylock.
Yep.
How did you hook up with Josh and Devil's Due?
Um, so Josh and I, we always traveled similar circles, even though we didn't really know each other very well. And so it's essentially boiled down to the whole the crypto space, when that was a thing, or that was a bigger thing, or actually it's bigger now than it was back then, but anyways.
It's a
Right,
new thing, maybe.
right, it was a newer thing back then, and he was in the same, he had a lot of the same things that I had, or I was collecting. And so we just kind of talked. It was like, hey, you're the comics guy. Oh, hey, you're the comics guy. And it's like, and then, so yeah, that's how we started talking. And it's like the whole crypto space is really like a whole different culture in of itself, and trying to navigate all that and try to understand it. And it's a lot of work. And a lot of times, as they call it, like the normies, didn't really understand when you're throwing all these jargon at each other. And so, Josh and I shared some similar jargon, I guess. And so that's how that came about. And we are just like, hey, maybe we should do something together. Yeah.
Yeah. When did he pitch you, or what did you think when he first pitched you on the concept? Is it
Um,
something you were immediately interested in, or did you need some convincing?
uh, well, so it's different than what I thought it was going to be. That's for sure. And it's so I was immediately interested, but what I was more interested in, I think, is that um, he wanted to do a GI Joe-esque story
Right.
that was more, just like guts and gore, and just, a lot of, like, just like the holds barred, basically. Um, and I guess I should caveat all of this by saying that if I could have, if I could do any book in all of comics, it would still be Lobo. I've always loved Lobo. It's like the book that kind of like drew me in, that made me actually read comics, back when Simon Bisley was doing it. And just the way that the humor of it, the style of it, and just that angle is how I would want to do a comic book, right? So when Josh offered up this his ideas for Disavowed, I was immediately drawn to that because it, kind of, it was like Lobo, but G.I. Joe-ish, So I was like, huh? Okay, and yeah, so that's how it all came about.
Do you have was GI Joe kind of part of your like childhood uh
Uh,
cultural touchstone or not as much?
I want to say not as much. I collected GI Joes, but I just love Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes. I can't even speak. But no, I really liked Snake Eyes a lot, and I mean, who doesn't like Snake Eyes? I think he was the genius that is or that is oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Um, oh, he's gonna kill me.
Wait.
Who's the writer of GI
Oh,
Joe again?
Larry Hama.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, just
Yeah, I was trying to figure out
like
what you
yeah,
were even
yeah.
trying to
I
get
was
at.
I was
Yeah.
referencing Larry Hama. Larry Hama was the genius that, like, you know he Snake Eyes was just like the ultimate I don't know, cheat code. You know what I mean? It was
Right.
like the simplest character that was instantly uh, just likable because of his like background, his martial arts, and he was a ninja basically. And it's like,
Yeah.
and he captured that in lightning in a bottle, I think, with just culturally, like, I don't know if you remember, if you were around during that time, but everything was just about ninjas. It was like I mean, the American Ninja, or
Right.
like all those ninja movies were coming out at that time, Kung Fu Theater, all of that.
Yeah.
And so, G.I. Joe was also, or Snake Eyes came out, or at least when I was first introduced to him, it was during that time.
Right.
It was like, there's a ninja like toy, yes, and yeah, so that sucked you into the whole mythology of G.I. Joe with and Sunday cartoons and all that stuff. So yeah, but
Yeah.
I hate to say it, like, that's really what I know of G.I. Joe. Um, and so I guess I'm kind of an outsider-ish of in that way for G.I. Joe. Um, but I'm learning a lot of the lore as I go, and
Yeah.
or I mean, it's a totally different book. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean,
I just
sometimes
didn't
that could
think.
be an advantage, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
because you're giving like a fresh coat of paint to
right,
something that people are familiar with. And it's
right,
not, it's not G.I. Joe. It's something,
yeah,
you know, to the
right,
left or right or
right,
whatever, just
yeah,
skewed,
yeah,
so it really, I think, probably helps that maybe that you don't have as much,
right,
ingrained in you. Yeah.
right, exactly. I think it's a similar in a way to how I felt into He-Man. Um,
Hmm.
uh, I was going to correct you earlier about, like, the longest run I ever done of a comic book was He-Man, actually.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah.
SpyBoy I had done something like 17 issues of, I think, something like that. But He-Man, I don't even remember how many I drew. I worked on He-Man for like 3 years, and it was a lot of books. It was a lot of issues. I have to go back and get the page count again, but it was a lot of pages. And when I started He-Man, it was also the same thing as this thing, where I didn't really know much about it beyond, like, the morning cartoons.
Hmm.
Um, I had maybe He-Man, a He-Man toy at one point, and that was like very briefly. But by the end of the project, I had learned so much about the He-Man lore, um, because I mean, I had to, because it was like you can't just, like, keep on faking it until you make it. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Like, so you have to, like, be a real expert on what it is that you're doing. So, you know, so that's how, that's the whole thing with He-Man. But even with Disavowed, I didn't want to be clueless about what we're doing. Because I mean, the thing about Disavowed is we have to navigate, and this is kind of the important part that we're still trying to navigate. I think is we have to navigate how close we are getting to the actual property versus like how much are we riffing and how much are we kind of poking fun at or are we referencing the the story of GI Joe,
Hmm.
and we have to make sure that it's very distinct that it's not this is not this, right? It's just
Right.
it's um it might draw some similarities, but it's definitely not that. um so yeah, we're still not. I think Josh is doing a good job with navigating all of that, so
Yeah.
kudos to him. Yeah.
Um, are you having fun drawing the title? Is there what is
Yeah.
the new what do you like best? And I'll roll in yet another question because I'm famous
Sure.
for doing this,
Sure.
which is there's probably a decent amount of tech in there. Is that something you like to draw?
No, I hate tech. I'm going to and Josh knows this too. I'm at first I always go into these projects kind of going, I've never done it, or like I'm like I'm not good at this, so I want to do it, right? And then I cuss myself out every day as I'm doing it because I hate doing it. But it's I'm decent at it, but um, it was a lot of like drawing like guns and stuff that's real. And
Yeah.
so you can't just like fake it, you have to like look at reference. And that's the slowest thing. Because you're like, how many balls are on this thing? And my brain doesn't allow me to like, simplify things sometimes. I'd have to go like, well, there's one, two, three, I have to like kind of count how many
Right.
bolts
Right.
there are or whatever. And um and then I'll start off strong, and by like the 40th bolt, I'll just kind of go I don't care, and just kind of no, I don't want to do that, but I kind of yeah. So I guess it's a mixture of both, right? You can kind of tell where I'm like there's like 36 bolts in this gun, I got to get it right. And then to where I'm like I get tired, I'm like, what, there's bolts in this gun. That's all you
Don't
need to know.
count
There's
them.
bolts in
Just
this
know
gun.
that they're there.
Right, right, exactly. So yeah, that's my love-hate relationship with tech, and cars and anything real.
What's
Just
your
try to get
favorite
them
stuff
real.
to draw in the Disavowed or anywhere?
Uh, I think the extreme violence, it's kind of fun, although like it's tiring at a certain point because you're like, but yeah, I think it's just being as outrageous as possible. It's what I really enjoy about drawing the disavow and trying to shock people and have them go, "Good Lord, man, really? You gotta draw that many brains, like brain splatters or whatever."
Yeah.
Like people only have two eyes. Why are there like three eyeballs in here? I don't know.
You never know. You don't know what's inside your body. Maybe it's just,
Exactly. It's your
it's
unborn
part of the
twin.
guts. There's just
That's
an
right.
eyeball in there somewhere.
It's your chimera twin
Right.
that's like
Exactly. All the viscera and stuff.
yeah.
Um, well, cool. So from what I understand when we're recording this,
Mhm.
the first issue had a successful Kickstarter,
Mhm.
and I think we're in the middle right now. You must be maybe you're done with two, or maybe working on three, but
Mhm.
I think it's intended to be start out as a 5 or 6 issue miniseries. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. So I'm not that involved with the inner workings of a lot of the administrative stuff that Josh is doing. With Massive and all that. So I don't
Hmm.
really know. Um, I try to get the gist of where we're headed, um, and how many issues we're doing. But right now I'm just concentrated on getting this issue of Disavowed done, and doing the best I can with art and trying to draw
Yeah.
all the different bolts on the dang gun. Yeah.
All right. So
Yep.
what else are you working on? If you could tell us anything
Sure,
that
sure.
fans can look forward to.
Yeah. So I just got done with a quick little thing with DC. Uh, I'm not sure if I can divulge what it is yet. Um, but it's got, I drew some Batgirl in it, some Nightwing, uh some dinosaur stuff, and then yeah, all kinds of craziness in that little story. So
Cool,
that should be coming out soon if
great.
it hasn't already. But yeah.
And where can fans find you online, follow you,
All
see
right.
what you're up
So
to?
at Popman, at POPM, as in Mary HAN, and that's pretty much across the board for anything. Instagram. Actually, I only have Instagram and Facebook now that I think about it. I haven't really set up the other stuff yet.
Okay, it's good
Yes,
enough. I
sir.
mean,
Yep.
Instagram is usually
Yep.
the place to
I,
be.
I'm not as active as I used to be on those social media stuff. So and I'm trying to fix all of that because I took a break. I took a 3 year break from
Yeah,
comics for a while, just to kind of figure out what it is that I wanted to do and everything else. But yeah, now I'm trying to get back into it and drawing again, and it's been a really fun ride. It's been a really fun ride these past couple of years, trying to get
awesome.
back into it. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely, dip your toe back in the social area. There's
yeah,
stuff you don't want to get into, obviously, and there's
yeah,
definitely an ugly
yeah,
side, but there's a, good
yeah,
fan base there and community.
yeah, for
Uh,
sure. I mean, I've never been disappointed by fans. Honestly, even some of the darkest times on like Flash or Ghost Rider. I think those were the only times where I got a lot of backlash. But even then it was like a lot of like there was a lot of goodness that came out of it. Where I grew a lot,
yeah,
artistically and as a person. Like you learn to take things less personal, um, and you start to understand people. If you're just a hair, a smidge of like empathic, you would totally understand that hey, people are passionate about things that they love, right? And in a way, um, when you're taking on a project, it's almost like you're taking stewardship of this thing that these fans love, right? And
yeah,
so you have to really do your best, and you have to really understand that this is nothing personal. It's just like the fact that you are taking over and creating doing something with this thing that's beloved by many.
right.
And so
And we're back. Thank you, Pop, for being on the show. Would love to have you back, maybe closer to when more Disavowed comes out. But really enjoyed talking to you and, learning more about storytelling consultancy. That was another piece of Pop's career that we were able to talk about, and kind of a unique one. But that'll do it for this episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. Thank you all out there for listening and for viewing and for rating, reviewing, subscribing, helping to support the show. Remember, we do have our Patreon, which is Dollar Bin Boosters. Go check that out. Support us, and we will support you with more interviews with comics best and brightest. So until next time.